Welcome to ICN Sunday Morning. I'm Vernon Loeb, Executive Editor. So we're coming up on our 18th anniversary at Inside Climate News. And joining me this morning is David Sassoon, our founder and publisher. I was a newspaperman for 40 years before I made my way to nonprofit journalism and Inside Climate News. And I was fortunate to work for some of the greatest publishers and editors of the era. Gene Roberts at the Philadelphia Inquirer, Don Graham, publisher of the Washington Post, John Carroll and Dean Baquet at the LA Times, and Nancy Barnes at the Houston Chronicle. David Sassoon is right up there. The culture at all those great papers where I worked flowed from the person at the top. And the same is true here at Inside Climate News. David cares passionately about climate change. He's a staunch believer in the power of journalism, and he loves great writing and deep reporting. And as I'm always kidding him, he also loves to say yes whenever anybody in the newsroom comes up with a big idea, like covering China's Belt and Road Initiative, which we're in the thick of this year. And so without further ado, welcome, David.
Vernon, you know how to make me feel really good about myself, so thank you for that. Truth be told, the legacy of those luminaries of great journalism are in our newsroom, thanks to you. So I think that's where we have to start. I consider myself enormously lucky to be able to work with you. In terms of the 18 years, I think it's an amazing milestone for me. We've reached adulthood, and you've had a lot to do with that, But it's also a sobering moment, because who would have thought when we started that we would be coming to a moment when the free press and free speech would be under assault, when science and fact-based knowledge would be under assault. So here we are. We've built a very important platform now to serve this time, and we could never have foreseen it back when we started this thing.
Yeah. So let's go back to the beginning. What possessed you 18 long years ago to start something called Inside Climate News, which, as I understand it, was basically you and somebody else as a blog when it started?
Right. It was me and Stacy Feldman, who is now running the Boulder Reporting Lab. And we gave up the blogging pretty quickly because we realized original reporting is what was needed at the time. But let me just rewind for a second. In the 1980s, I was a documentary black and white photographer. And I spent 5 years based in Kathmandu, Nepal. And what that means is that I was in the Himalayas. And it is a place where when you look across landscapes, you see people at this size and houses and whole villages at this size. The true scale of things. It was a very important education to understand, our relationship to nature and which one is actually bigger. So fast forward from that experience to the early 2000s, when I was at a crossroads in my career and I started learning about climate change. And I realized this is a place where I might be able to make a contribution. And the governing idea in the early days was, could we produce journalism that avoided false balance and really told the true story of the climate issue that wasn't really being properly covered by the press? There was a gap there that we wanted to fill. And so we entered into it and proceeded from there.
Yeah, and that's what I meant when I said the culture, the person at the top is really, informs the institution. So you start inside Climate News, and then 5 years later, you kind of shock the world. You win the Pulitzer Prize for your coverage of an oil spill in the Kalamazoo River in Michigan. It was such a feat that you were even on the Colbert Show.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, first of all, Susan White was our executive editor at the time, and she led us to the Pulitzer. And as a result of that, I do end up on the Colbert Report. And I have to say, it was one of the more terrifying experiences of my life. But the other thing that I'm thinking about, you bring that up, is it's interesting in this moment when the free press is under assault, so are the comedians. And so what kind of a society are we going to be if we don't have free speech and laughter, right? But that was a great project, and it's on our site, on our project page. So I won't go into the details of it, but it really was an important project at the time.
And then 3 years later, of course, you published the story that we're still really best known for, a story that's now called Exxon Knew. And it was a story about how the scientists in Exxon knew all about climate change and, in fact, forecast its trajectory back in the 1980s. I love the story behind that story. Tell that for us.
Well, the genesis of the idea for this story came from Daniel Ellsberg. I met him at a conference. I had him to myself for half an hour, and we got to talking. And the full story of that encounter and how it, led to that project, I wrote it up a couple of years ago when he died. I wrote an appreciation of him, a very courageous and heroic man, I thought, and had a big impact on a project that we did, and inspired us to do something that our tiny newsroom pulled off. I mean, that was the other piece of it. I convinced the newsroom to do it, and they did it. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. So you took on Exxon back then. We're taking on China right now. You're not afraid to go after big subjects.
Well, neither are you, right?
That's right. All right. So enough about the past. Let's fast forward to now. Okay. So in the 6 years since I've been here, since I've joined you, we've more than doubled in size, really. We're 40 full-time people now. We have 12 national bureaus. We have a fleet of national correspondents. We have a fellowship program that involves many of the nation's best universities: Columbia, MIT, UC Berkeley, Northwestern, MIT. I don't want to name them all. We have 175 newsroom partners. And we recently passed a milestone, 1 million page views a week. And soon, I think the next frontier may be foreign bureaus. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about that, where we put them. So really, we're thinking global. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the map of our bureaus or our locations back in 2017, you would have seen us clustered around the Northeast mostly, and a little bit in California. And if you look at the map of where we are now, it's actually an incredible story. And, we opened our first bureau in Louisville just before you came. And I told you, I said, listen, this is what we have to figure out. Local environmental journalism is on the ropes. We could fill that gap. How do we do it? And it took a while. We were interrupted by COVID. Let's not forget. Those were, that was a difficult period of time. But it's incredible what we've been able to put together. The funders have supported it. We've kind of gone where the puck is going. And now we're, all over the country. and doing a really important local work.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You use the puck metaphor. I like to say we zig while others zag, which I got from Gene Roberts way back at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I think one of the key insights we had in figuring out local is that at first we were trying to create these sort of regional groupings of states, which was very difficult. But then we figured out how to go state by state, and we realized that if we could put a reporter or two in a state, we could actually sort of working with our partners dominate the conversation or lead the conversation around climate in that state. Do you think that was the key, or what do you see as the keys to our sort of figuring out how to really sort of cover climate nationally and locally simultaneously?
Yeah, you wanted to work in Texas. You had been there running the newsroom of the, Houston Chronicle as managing editor. You knew the state well. It is a state that has all sides of the climate story in it. Great laboratory, really important place to be.
Yeah.
So I managed to find us a little funding to get our toe in the water, and off we went. And I think the key to it is also your ability to collaborate with other newsrooms. You knew everybody in Texas, as far as I'm concerned, and then that kind of became the model that really rose to the surface. We had tried at some other things, right? But I think collaboration is really part of the key to it. And also, let me just sort of make a plug for nonprofit journalism. The nonprofit model allows us to be collaborative and not competitive. And you understand that better than anybody. I think by leaning into being a nonprofit and being able to follow the story where it needs to go and to be able to collaborate and give our work away to readers as well as other newsrooms, it changes the dynamic and makes us devoted to the issue and not about profitability or selling something or clicks or all those kinds of things. So it was a combination of things. I think really embracing the nonprofit model and leaning into it, and also the collaboration, and then all of the experience you brought to the table.
Yeah, I think it all really came together well in Texas. We started with one reporter, then we went to two, and now we have three. We have a third reporter covering renewable energy. Most people don't know Texas is also the leading renewable state, but we also had a really strong partner in the Texas Tribune, which is talk about the growth and dominance of nonprofit news in places. The Texas Tribune, I think, truly is now the leading news organization in Texas, and they publish most of what we write in Texas, and they distribute it to dozens of smaller newspapers in Texas. And so yeah, and I think we saw that if we could do that in Texas, we could do it anywhere. And I certainly believe that now. And I know, we have our airline map, we like to call it, and you and I spend a lot of time talking about, well, where's the next bureau? I want a bureau in Atlanta, in Portland, Seattle. We have our top candidates, and I think we're going to get there. And when we need to get there, because the moment is incredibly urgent. We're in a national and international crisis, and I think we're doing incredible. We're covering the most important story on the planet, and the biggest, most gargantuan story I've ever seen. I used to cover the Pentagon at the Washington Post and thought I was covering the ultimate beat. The Pentagon is dwarfed by climate change because climate change touches everything, including national security. So, yeah. Okay. So, where do we go from here? I think on some level, the first 5 or 6 years of Inside Climate News, you were wrestling a national story, and then we spent the last middle years, kind of figuring how to cover climate nationally and locally, to add local to that mix. Are we now looking at going global? Is that how you see things evolving from here? Especially with China ascendance and a China team kind of number one on our list, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've talked a lot about this. I think that's right. I mean, we went local because that's where the story was going and needed to be told. And again, being a nonprofit, we could do that and tell those important stories and find the funders and the funding to do that. You've opened the door to international reporting for us in a way we've never done it, and sent people all over. And you know, the project from last year is up for an important award. And who are the other two finalists besides us? The New York Times and the Washington Post. Pretty good, Vernon.
Yeah.
So, you know, so yeah, I think the story is moving globally because this administration is abdicating its role as a player in the climate story. So China is stepping into it. And as we know, they're making more EVs than anybody else, and they're doing clean energy all over the world and solar panels, et cetera. China desk would be really important, and I think an anchor for global coverage, and we're trying to find support to do that. You know, as you said, this is the biggest story, so we need to keep expanding, and we do have plans to, you know, go from 40 people. We're now 40 people. That's also incredible, right? We started with 2. Maybe we'll be 60 soon, you know? And I think we can handle that kind of growth, and the story needs it. And we're not going to give up anything we're doing locally. We're not going to. And then let's not forget, I mean, we get into these conversations, but, you know, there's a whole map of topics that are not geographic that we want to cover. And this year you opened an oceans desk, right? So that's, you know, that's incredible. We're going to have a second person on that desk soon. And that's also part of the story. And there are all these other things that we want to be covering.
Yeah, yeah. Can't really write about climate change unless you're covering the oceans. You certainly can't write about it now unless you're covering China. You know, this year we sent staff reporters to Africa. We sent staff reporters to Indonesia on the China project. And, you know, we need to have somebody or multiple people permanently in Africa, permanently in Southeast Asia, you know, permanently in Europe and Southern Europe. It's a global story. There's one climate. We all share the same climate. So let's end by talking about climate change. You know, I have doomer tendencies. I edit these stories day in and day out about climate science, about deep pollution, about extreme weather events. The trends are horrible. You know, we're 10 years on from the Paris Accords, and the globe has never made emissions go down in a single year since. And each year gets progressively hotter than the last. So, you know, I end a lot of my work days like depressed as hell. I'm wondering how you cope.
Yeah, well, you know how I cope. I call you, you know.
A lot of good
And,
that'll do you.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. I think what makes it even harder is the willful ignorance that has infected the public square around this issue in this country. It's really awful. You know, even the characterization of environmental concern as being woke is such a contemptuous and cruel way of, you know, dismissing, you know, one of the most important issues that anybody faces in the world. So that makes it really, really hard, right? When there is that layer on top of the crisis, right? I'm not the only person that, you know, thinks that our country is better than this. And that's where I think we can draw some solace here, because there are so many people who appreciate what we're doing. Our readership is up 100% this year. And not only that, but our readers also send us contributions. And whether they're sending us $25 or $100 or even $1,000, whatever they can afford, they always write a little something about why. And we read every single one, and we get enormous sustenance and moral support from that, right? It's not just the dollars that come in, which are really important to us. The other thing is our newsroom. The culture that, you've built, I've helped you build it. We have enormous solidarity and collegiality, and we really increasingly feel like we're serving a very important function, as small as we are. And so having purpose and being able to do something, that counts for a lot.
Yeah. I think everybody on our staff really feels the sense that, it's their journalism, it's our journalism that is at the heart of our success. It powers everything we do. It powers our growth. We've grown because our journalism has been strong, and
Right.
People want more of it. It's a very pure play, and it's very gratifying to work here with these people. I think one thing you and I agree on is we actually agree on a lot of things, but I think when it comes to climate change, we both strongly feel that if we're gonna win, if we're gonna solve this crisis, it's gonna require some fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with nature. Maybe it begins with driving an EV, or I don't know, becoming a vegan, whatever. How do you think where to begin? Where must that begin to bring about this sort of new way of thinking?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you. I think a new way of thinking is what we need. And I mean, really, to go back to what I started talking about, being in the Himalayas, being in nature, wherever we are, there are a lot of lessons that nature has to offer, and we need to start heeding those. One of the ways that we're doing it in our newsroom, we started the beat for Rights of Nature that Katie Surma is so brilliantly filling and invented, really. And that is a whole movement around the world that is about a different relationship to nature than we in the developed world have. And it has a lot to do with indigenous knowledge and indigenous rights and things like that. And it's not a side story, right? It's central to our report. And so I think that we are under that umbrella of trying to be as expansive and inclusive of what's inside the climate story. It's not just CO2. It really is philosophical and moral questions. And our staff gets to explore it, and our readers get to experience it. And we're trying to lead a conversation here. And ultimately it's a privilege to be able to do this.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to leave it. David, thanks so much. Really, really fun talking to you as ever. And
Right.
For everybody watching, thanks so much for watching, for reading our stuff every week and supporting us the way you do. We really could not do this without you.